April here, and for this session, we are going to do something a little bit different. We are going to be covering the rules, or specifically what I would call a huge oversight in the rules, something that sort of annoys me. And you can see from the title, from the thumbnail, that what we're covering is the rule that we are now seeing of teams must wait until the conclusion of any ongoing team fight before pausing. And I've actually seen this in third party tournaments in Overwatch before. It took a good 3, maybe 4 years before I saw that show up in a third party tournament. Maybe it showed up in one or two before then. But in the history of Overwatch, that's not been the major tournament organizer stance, and it hasn't been the stance of Activision Blizzard. And this is an official Activision Blizzard tournament. This is this is run by them. This is their thing. It hasn't been in those in the past. So I'm really disappointed to see this here. And I am going to go over this just sort of to prove that it hasn't been the thing. It is something that players thought was a thing. I totally understand if you thought it was a thing in the past, that you can't pause in the middle of the team fight myth. If you thought that was real, I totally get it. It was widespread that people thought it was real. Heard that into the tier 3 scene, even at a contenders scrim where one of our players controlled the lobby, and I had to tell him, wait, no, you actually have to pause it when they request a pause, and they're like, but the team fight's not over. And, this was someone who'd been in contenders for a season or two, and whoops, they didn't know it. So it was a widespread myth. I totally get why people have the myth. It's one of those things that people sort of want to be true, much like we had going around last year in tier 3 and some in collegiate scrim scene, this don't stagger baby diva in scrims. It was a myth, but it was a myth that caught on and spread quite a bit. So this was a myth. To prove that, I'm going to go through some of the rule books that we have for previous seasons. And as we can see here, we go up, and first we're going to look here. This is the more official Homecoming rule books. This is an abbreviation for 2021. This is the official PDF rule book, and we can see teams must wait until the conclusion of any ongoing team fight before pausing. Okay, so that is there in the official rules. Then we can go here. Here I'm going back in time. This was about as far back in time as I was able to go. The reason I couldn't go back in time forever is not all of the tournament hosting websites keep tournaments up forever after they're done. So we've went back. We found some of the PDFs. Here's 2018. That'll be enough back in time for us. And let's see what our pause rules look like. Each team is allowed 5 minutes. Sure. You get one 5-minute thing per map. Different stages on Koth count as one map. Pauses used to contact tournament administrators for disputes will not be counted against the time bank. Great. Team must forfeit or continue play after their time is up. Game restart. Okay, so is there anything else we're missing about here in pause? No. So, technical issue about pause. So there's nothing in here about not being able to pause mid-team fights or anything like this. And this is open division. So in open division games, like in collegiate games, there's often not any sort of official tournament administrator in the tournament or in the lobby. In a contenders match, for example, you'll generally have an administrator in the lobby who's controlling the lobby, who they get to figure out the pause stuff. So there's nothing in here directing people not to pause in the middle of the team fight. And if it's not in the rules, it's not the rules. And we'll get more clear about that as we get further in time here. But if there's nothing in the rules that says, oh, this team fight thing, well, then we won't have any reason to pause during the team fight. Speaking of which, I should point out as I go here, it says no pause during team fight. If we knew exactly what a team fight was, maybe that wouldn't be a problem, but there's nothing else in this rule book. This is the official rule book. I'm in the PDF now that tells us what a team fight is. There is no glossary for this term. And you and I might think we know what a team fight is, but that's actually very subjective, and I'll go over some examples of why later in this video here. So here we were. This was Open Division 2018. Nothing about no pausing during team fights. You pause when there's a technical issue. Great. Here we go on to Open Division 2020. We'll do some contenders rulebooks as well. This is Season 2 in 2020, so this would be later in the year. We're down here on pauses. 10-minute of emergency pause time, so they've adjusted those rules slightly. No problem. Are only for emergencies, such as player disconnects, hardware failures, and internet connection issues. Great. Okay, fine. Totally fine. Only for technical issues. Doesn't actually get enforced very well, and it's almost impossible to enforce because these tournaments are played remotely. This is open division. You don't really know if a team's having a technical issue or not. They can say, headset died, can't hear team, Discord trouble, mouse isn't working. You can say whatever you want. Can't really enforce it, but that's fine. They can put down the rules, not hurting anything there. And then we have this. Lobby hosts must pause the game immediately after requested by any player in the server within reason. Okay, nothing here about waiting for a team fight to end. That's not what this within reason means. Nothing here about a team fight. Nothing in the rules I'd expect about team fights. Nope. So as we look at the pause, we're looking at immediately within reason. Okay, this is 2020, open division. Cool, that would have been last year. Nothing too wild there. Okay, so that's very clear. Here, there was nothing about waiting until the end of team fights. Here, it says immediately within reason. No question there. That makes sense. Okay, cool. Nothing else about pauses here that in any way contradicts that. Fine. Now we'll move on to Open Division 2021. We're going to jump down to pauses. And we see again, lobby hosts must pause the game immediately after requested by any player in the server within reason. Okay, makes sense to me. Here we'll move on to contenders. This was an early contenders, 2018 version 1. We'll get a later one as well. Pauses are potentially a little bit different here because most of the time in contenders, you have some sort of lobby host that you're working with that gets to look at this, that is controlling the lobby. That's not 100% always true, but that's generally true. And we go through here and we see, that's for rescheduling, pause time. Only available to teams in extreme circumstances, such as technical or network issues. Tournament administrators should be notified of the reason for the pause and will determine the proper action forward to resolve paused matches. Okay, so this is again saying to resolve paused matches, so you potentially pause it before they get there, which you'd have to, especially if you're playing off broadcast, potentially without an administrator there. If a full 6-man roster is unable to be maintained throughout the map, disconnects or other technical issues, map will eventually be forced to continue as normal, playing down a member. That's fine. Generally, there's a play down a member option if you run out of pause time. Occasionally, you won't see that option and you just lose if you run out of pause time, but the reality is you're just going to unpause before that and play down a member. Not a big deal. Okay, playing a man down, great. Anything else about pauses here? Let's take a look. No return, pauses. Pause requests will be communicated in match chat during the ongoing match. The details of why a pause is requested must be communicated to tournament administration. No problem. That's still nothing about team fights. Okay, fine. Nothing there. And then we have a more recent contenders rulebook. This was a 1.0. This was a 2.0. Pause time. Only available in extreme circumstances. Playing a man down. Nothing here about waiting till the end of a team fight before pausing. So I wanted to pull that out because there's been this myth that existed that people misunderstood of, oh, I can't pause during team fights. And that has been a myth that's existed for most of Overwatch's history. That's not been the case for the overwhelming majority of tournaments, especially these official Blizzard-hosted tournaments. We just went through Contenders and Open Division here. I can't show you the rules for the previous Homecoming. I don't think I can anyways, because they were unfortunately hosted on Game Battles here, and Game Battles does not keep the tournaments up after they're over. They don't keep them up very long after they're over. I can't go look at last season's version of Homecoming. It wasn't called Homecoming. Homecoming is a rebrand of the Activision Blizzard Collegiate tournament name there. That's perfectly fine, but that's not available to us. But this is a change. This is not the standard for them. We saw as recently as 2021 Open Division, it was you have to grant the pause immediately. And that is something that we want to understand there. This was a myth, but through this collective myth, it's sort of been forced into existence. Maybe they're just going, hey, this is collegiate, let's try something different. Maybe they had someone new write this, and this person new was from the scrim scene, and they thought this was always the case. Who really knows? It's a terrible rule, and it's a terrible rule because it's subjective. And let's get into why this is subjective. So if you look at this, what is a team fight? We didn't actually define that word. And you and I might think like, oh, well, if we're in a situation where this dive happens, this is a team fight. Blue team and red team are clearly fighting. This is clearly a team fight. Well, I'd agree. I think we'd all agree that this is a team fight. But when does it stop being a team fight? Or when does it start being a team fight? If these guys in a dive matchup, since that which we just talked about, are battling for lanes, is this a team fight? Is this a team fight right now? We have the cores poking at each other. We have the tracers totally independently of the cores, maybe with a harmony orb, but mostly totally independently of the cores, battling each other for control of a lane. We have the Hammonds battling each other for control of a lane. We have the Sombras battling maybe to see who can get control of a health pack over here. Is this a team fight? They're all sort of individually messing with each other. There's maybe like 3 or 4 different fights going on, but is this a team fight? Well, I don't know. Is it a team fight if anyone has shot anyone else in the last, what, 5 seconds? 10 seconds? 3 seconds? Is it enough people have to be fighting each other? Would this be a team fight? 3 people are involved? Would this be a team fight if 2 different one-on-ones are happening? Like, what is a team fight? And if it's, something like, oh, well, no one has to have heard anyone else for at least 5 seconds, is someone who's going to pause it? Like, if you're the tracer and you have lobby lead, do you really know if the Sombras have shot each other within the last 5 seconds? If the Hammonds have shot each other in the last 5 seconds? Well, that doesn't really make sense. So it seems like the only thing that could be the team fight would be like this true dive that we've talked about, or this true brawl phase that we've talked about. Well, how many members have to be in on it? Or is it just the brawl phase and the cleanup phase or the team fight? But that doesn't really make sense either. That doesn't really work because we get into situations where, let's say we have a comp rotating through here, and we have Ashe who ineffectively can't reach right here, these guys who mostly can't hit the opposing team from there, and maybe we just have Ashe poking at this team. We have one Ashe poking at 5 people here. Is that a team fight? Well, if she's done damage, even damage to Ryan's barrier or forced out defense matrix or anything like that, does that count? Can we now not pause the game because she did damage to someone? Oh, okay. Well, if that's the case, especially if they disconnect a player, the strategy would be to get our own, like Sombra or something, and intentionally keep them in combat, right? Like anytime that they try to rotate, if they try to wait in here or something like this, just keep them in combat because that's apparently a thing. Well, that doesn't really make sense. Or, okay, well, it's not a team fight here, but is it a team fight here when we've sort of rotated away? And now we're in this situation where we have our poke battle happening back and forth here. We've got some poke going on like this, some poke going on like this. Was this not a team fight? I mean, this is how a poke comp fights. Now, obviously, they'd like to have some angles and things like that, but this is how a poke composition fights. They like their poke phase. This team likes this poke phase less. Is this not a team fight because it's not brawl? Like, no, of course this is still a team fight. And you might go, no, this is poke phase. Poke phase is, like not a team fight. Or you might say, no, this is poke phase. This is real. That's part of a poke fight. That's part of a team fight. Well, if poke phase is part of a team fight, want to know what happens during the poke phase? Rotations also happen during the poke phase. And that means this was a team fight too, or this was a team fight too, because the rotation phase and the poke phase are the same phase of a fight. Or like at what point in cleanup does it happen? Or do we need to go back to, is this a team fight happening? If Bastion's trying to retreat into spawn to switch heroes and Tracer's chasing them down, is this a team fight that's happening right here? Just this one thing going on here? This is just cleanup that's happening? Like, we're not going to be able to define that term satisfactorily to everyone's decision, and even if we were able to everyone's satisfaction, and even if we were able to, we haven't done so in the rules. So it's a terrible thing to include in the rules. And I'm really disappointed to see this here. I get that some players think it's the case. I get maybe collegiate feels like a place for Blizzard to try out a different version of the rules, since players seem to think or maybe want this to be the case, but it really can't be the place. And it really shouldn't be the place. It really just shouldn't happen, period. And I do get it. Like, I do get that pauses are disruptive. It can be annoying to be in a situation where, hey, the game got paused, and pauses do create impossible situations where too much communication can happen, too much planning can happen. You can redo your ult tracking. You can talk about exactly where your resources are. It can ruin a team surprise play. I totally get that, but having that in there, this no, we're not going to pause in team fights to try to avoid that issue, it's simply not worth the cost of, well, let's have this arbitrary team fight thing that we haven't really defined, can't really define, wouldn't really define, agree on something. Again, if it's like haven't been in combat for 5 seconds, how does your Tracer, how does your Zen, how does whoever who has lobby lead know? That's just not going to work very well, and this is a really arbitrary thing, which is the last thing you want in any competitive sport type environment, but is also even worse when you don't have officials in every single match, which is going to be the case in something like Overwatch, where you can have officials maybe in every Contenders game. You don't always. You can have it in every OWL game. You can have it in the playoffs of Collegiate. You can't have it necessarily in every Trials game, in every Open Division game, in every Collegiate game. It's a terrible way to go here. And I could take some other shots at these rules. I'm really less than thrilled with what we found here. We take a look here. That's not what I want. I want to pause time. Excuse me. Could take a couple other shots at these rules. For example, another issue that we have is if you are the team who controls the lobby, you must still request the pause and receive confirmation from the opposing team before initiating the pause. I guarantee you that most of the time, the opposing team hasn't read the rules. So if you're actually lobby host and you go, oh shoot, we need a pause, and you say, pause please or something to the other team is going to shrug their shoulders and be like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? They're not going to know because they didn't read the rules. So they're not going to grant your pause quickly enough. And you're going to have to explain in match chat while the game is being played, while the timers are ticking down, that you want to pause and they have to say yes because they won't have read this. So like you're hamstrung if you're the lobby leader in this situation. If you're not the lobby leader, you're just going to say pause please, and the other team hopefully are decent human beings and are just going to go and hit the pause button for you. And them hitting the pause button for you is going to be them accepting your pause. So that's a stupid situation to put in here. This is a stupid situation to put in here. Also, you'll notice there's nothing in here that's like a punishment or a penalty or anything for not granting them their pause. So, oh, we request a pause. No. We're going to be super slow to grant it. Or while you guys are figuring out if the other team says yes or no to your pause, or figures out whether they, didn't realize they had to say yes to your pause, someone else starts a team fight, and now it's going to be another 30 seconds, 45 seconds before you're allowed to pause. This was really terribly handled, and I hope they adjust this, re-release this, whatever, at least for the playoffs. Another thing you get into here is technically because of how these rules are set up, where you get to streaming and spectating, players will be allowed to stream their matches during the tournament from their own perspective. Players streaming do so at their own risk. Participants on a roster and team may spectate that team only in the match using spectate red only or blue only. This is fine, except, I actually like this. I think it's a little foolish in a lot of ways when you force people in 2021 to try to go, you have to build in a delay to this, whatever. You can add a delay if you want for your competitive integrity, but if you're allowing yourself to be stream sniped, that's on you. It's actually not a very big risk for most of this stuff, and it is good for building hype. It is good for letting, for example, your team see what's going on, letting your coach, not having situations where coaches have to beg the other team to get permission to be able to spectate the match with their players. That's always felt foolish and stupid, whatever. It's good that we have this and there's no ability for the other team to nix it. The problem is there's not actually anything in these rules that say, hey, the coaches can't talk during the match. Now, I get it. It would be very hard to enforce that, just like it's always been very hard to enforce the no streaming thing, because especially since Discord added streaming within Discord, especially since YouTube added unlisted streams, it's been basically impossible to stop coaches or managers or whatever from being able to see these things. So I don't hold this one really against Activision Blizzard, really against our tournament organizers here. I get that. But technically, there's nothing in here that's stopping you from having someone else hard shot calling from your team that isn't in your match, having your coach coaching during the match. Technically, there's nothing in the rules that stop this. And if you were going full on try hard play to win, it's probably what you should do. Now, I don't expect to be doing that. Obviously this was never enforceable really that well in Contenders to stop coaches from doing it. We chose not to, and the reason we chose not to is because we knew we were trying to move our players up to OWL, and if we were trying to move our players up to OWL, they weren't going to be able to in OWL, because in OWL it will be enforced that, hey, the audio literally cuts off and the coaches can't talk to you because you're using their audio system, not Discord. So at least the potential of promotion did that there. There's a whole lot less of that in Collegiate. On a top team like one of mine, I do coaching for Northeastern. I do some coaching for other teams as well. But on a team like Northeastern, yes, I have a couple players that could find themselves on trials or contenders teams in the future. But that's not going to be true for the 300, I think it's 290 something teams that are signed up for this tournament that are in the homecoming collegiate thing going on. That's not the case. So It's a little silly not to have a rule doing that, though I do get it. It couldn't be enforced. I have way less issue with that, though, than I do with the pausing rule. The pausing rule is stupid. I've said my piece. I'm going to go ahead and be done with this presentation now. But if other people have thoughts, comments, things that they think, why they think I'm wrong, why they agree, anything like that, a rule that they saw for, no, I saw this other tournament, they did it, or here's the 2016 Open Division rule book that you don't have temporal and it says otherwise. Great. I'd love to see it, but I don't think it does. I know it doesn't, other than the 1 year gap I had. I knew Overwatch in the competitive scene pretty darn well. But I will now catch up on chat. If you were just here for the presentation, you're good. If you did enjoy that sort of thing, please do drop a like, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I will hope to see you next time. In chat, we have Mentos Frost saying, hey, Temporal, if opposing teams wouldn't benefit from it, they wouldn't care either. Wasn't there a coach player that someone was complaining about? Where can I find VODs of Northeastern playing? You can find VODs of Northeastern playing on this channel right here. We actually have a Northeastern playlist. And when we're allowed to do so, I have no problem whatsoever streaming our matches because that is better for the program. You will find programs, players, teams that go, no, we want to keep everything 100% secret. If it's not broadcast, we don't want it to be broadcast. And I get that from a pure competitive standpoint. That does give you a slight advantage, but what you lose in terms of competitive advantage by hiding that is not as good as what your program gains by always trying to be more public, trying to do things. Like we opt in when organizers contact us, and we did opt in. We should be getting we should be on broadcast. I likely won't stream it because we'll be getting NACE's official broadcast for our match tomorrow. We opt in for those sorts of things. That's good for your program. That's good for your organization to do those sorts of things. And most people who are going, no, we don't want to show anything like that because it's a slight competitive disadvantage, are being short-sighted. Much like the Owl teams were very short-sighted going into season 2, where they had each of them did a preseason game or two, and like all but one of the teams did incredibly stupid stuff where they were like, let's put our main tank on main support and our off tank on DPS and our DPS on flex support and do that, and now we'll play goats, but all of our players are on the wrong heroes because we don't want to show any of our strategies. And it's like, no, that is incredibly bad. There's a reason you don't see that in Major League Baseball and football, any of that in preseason games, because the organizations understand. Like, yes, from a coaching standpoint, from a player standpoint, hiding those things is good if it's not a real match, but from an organization standpoint, it's worth way more to the future of your organization, to the benefit, to the fans, to everyone, if you treat them somewhat seriously. You don't have to go like, try hard, use all your best strategies, but even something like Houston did that year where they went, we're just going to play an old meta. We're going to go out here with people and the right heroes, but we're going to play dive. Dive isn't the meta right now, but it could be in the future. It has been in the past. We'll just play dive in this preseason game. Great. Totally fine. They were one of the only organizations that deserved respect for how they were actually being run there, for having a manager or someone that actually understood what you needed to do there in a preseason game. Anyway, that was a tangent, but I'll continue. Nice. You were the GOAT. Thank you, Mr. T. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any more questions there, and I want to keep this short enough that it doesn't scare people out of clicking on it by being 3 hours long, so we'll go ahead and end it here. If you guys are enjoying it, please do like and subscribe. If you want to be here for these sorts of discussions in the future so that you can go ahead and participate in them, so that you can go ahead and have comments, make your things heard, be like, wait, no, Temporal, that's wrong, or no, everyone understands what a team fight is, or anything like that, best way to do that is join my Discord in the description below. Through there, you can become a watcher if you like, and then get notifications as a watcher when I go live. You'll be able to see what topic we're covering, decide, oh yeah, you're reviewing a Masters Winston, I absolutely care about that. You're talking about the rule set for Collegiate Overwatch, I do or don't care about that. You're reviewing someone else's Sombra guide, oh, I am interested. Did that person put up a Sombra guide? Any sort of thing like that, you're interested. Oh, we're doing a news story on some game that isn't Overwatch, fine. You can become a watcher, see what's interesting to you, be here for these discussions so that you can contribute, have your thoughts heard, all of that good stuff. Okay, thanks guys. Temporal out.